right, welcome everyone. Give it just another second so people can get connected to audio. I do have a couple of disclaimers before we get started with the workshop this afternoon. My name is Emily Nelson and I am the virtual host for this workshop this afternoon. So the first one is our reading disclosure. Please note that we are recording this workshop. If you would rather be incognito, please turn off your camera and change your name or remove your name. We are not recording any content from any breakout sessions if there are any. In regards to closed captioning, you may notice at the top of your screen a red button that says live on Zoom with rev.com. This is our live closed captioning service, and it does not mean that we are live streaming video anywhere publicly. We do ask participants to please honor the conference comfort agreements found on page 6 of your conference program or listed on the Peerpocalypse website. If at any time you need peer support, please visit www.peerpocalypse.com for a list of the on-call peer support specialists. And we do ask participants to keep themselves on mute. And if you have any questions or comments for the presenter, please utilize the chat box. I will make sure to be writing questions down as they come in so that we can answer questions at a good time. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
Hi there, welcome. My name is Kevin Fitz and I am a volunteer with a small volunteer nonprofit organization called the Oregon Mental Health Consumer Association. The Oregon Mental Health Consumer Association was founded in 2002, and one of the long-term goals of the organization is to impact and influence policy and service decisions at the county level, the state level, and the federal level. So, like I said, my name is Kevin Fitz. I'm a recovering alcoholic and a individual who has suffered half of my adult life with extreme states, i.e. Psychosis, severe psychosis, and the consequences of that. So anyway, I'm very glad to be here, and I have lots of information, and so let's get this going. Next slide. First slide, thank you. So what I wanted to put this into 3 parts, and one thing I want to say is we're going to have a break at 45 minutes, and then we want to go into question and answers, and then sort of round robin with a few invited guests to sort of help me have a sort of a discussion with all of you. But for the first part, I want to talk about some data, get your mind around what we're actually talking about. This is Oregon, so just want to let you know about that. So I want to talk about the state budget a little bit, some numbers of people, some of the challenges, show you a few videos, spotlight 2 or 3 projects that may give you some hope, go through my 10 points or my 10 suggestions that I'm learning, and then take a break and go into question and answers. So the title of this workshop is The Politics of Mental Illness in Oregon. I think that's the title. Had I had to do it over again, I probably would not use the word mental illness. That just was something I didn't think about when I was putting in there. But so let's move forward. The first thing I want to let you know is in the state of Oregon, particularly, we spend approximately $2 billion a year, roughly $4 billion every 2 years. State of Oregon does its government in a 2-year cycle, 2-year biennium cycle, i.e. meaning 2 years. So we spend about $2 billion a year on behavioral health services, including SUD, including problem gambling, including child services, with a significant minority of that money going to fund our state hospital institutions. So this is just sort of broad strokes. Next slide. So I want to go from the big to the more sort of relevant. Now this was done in 2015, but the state of Oregon put together what was called the Behavioral Health Collaborative Report. And in the executive summary of that, they suggested by their research that over 750,000 Oregonians sought some form of behavioral health support, therapy, intervention, medicine, support group, etc., to include, like I said, mental health, SUD, addictions, problem gambling. This was in 2015, though we think it's thought that due to COVID that this has increased probably by at least another 250,000 or more so. But that's just sort of a rough figure. There's 4.1 million people in Oregon. So that is about 1 out of 6. And that might be more now because this is 6 years old of information. Next slide. So this is where the rubber meets the road for me. The name of the little volunteer group I run is called the Oregon Mental Health Consumer Association. And we're not that I'm not interested in or not concerned about private pay or insurance, the commercial market. I certainly am. But the people who have significant diagnoses of severe and challenges oftentimes maybe don't start out being public mental health consumers, but a lot of times end up. And then these are the people, particularly in the lower 20% of the population as far as socioeconomic. So these people are on Medicaid, i.e. in Oregon, we call that the Oregon Health Plan, or they have no insurance at all, or they're on Medicare, or they are not signed up for services. And so we're talking roughly about 200,000 people in the state of Oregon get public, paid for by tax dollars, public behavioral health services. So that's pretty interesting. Here we are at a Peer Apocalypse conference, and I think we have 400 plus people registered. It's always interesting to me, and as a system advocate, God, I wish I could get more of these 145,000 behavioral health and 48,000 SUD consumers involved in system advocacy. And I should say, the purpose of this workshop is to intrigue you, poke you, provoke you, pinch you, get you engaged in thinking about politics, funding peer services, and I hopefully getting involved yourself as a system advocate someday. Next slide. So this is from the behavioral health director's presentation. This was 2 or 3 months ago, where our behavioral health director for the state of Oregon, a gentleman named Steve Allen, put together this slide for the lawmakers to give them some idea of the way that our system is structured, as far as there's policy committees here, there's community partners, there's coordinated care organizations, tribes, federal partners, etc. It's pretty complex when you try to sort of follow the dollar, and you also try to follow how is policy made. So that's this. You don't need to remember any of that. Just to remember, this is complex, and there's an awful lot of folks and coalitions, organizations, and policy boards that have some influence of the way that behavioral health services are shaped in Oregon. So next slide. This is, so we looked at how many people are using services, how much money are we giving to fund those services? And then here's the question that advocates like me want to know often, what are the money that we're putting out there on the pavement? Are we hitting the mark or are there challenges? And I'm always, as a system advocate, I love any type of advocacy, but it's particularly useful as an advocate when formal organizations, i.e. the state Secretary of State's office, opens up an audit. In the same way, it's also very important too, is a matter that you care about being heard in a legislative session. That formality gets the attention of the press, gets the attention of our community partners and our providers in a way that just an individual tweet or a Facebook post might not be seen as so consequential or so important to pay attention to. So anyway, next slide. One of the things that audit that came out last summer, particularly focused on the children's services, but one of the things is that you try to understand, you can see there in the middle of the OHA, how complicated, and I used this slide in a previous talk about 2 months ago. Some of you may remember Pee Wee Herman's Playhouse. Is there anybody, let's see a show of hands. Anybody remember Pee Wee Herman's Playhouse? Well, one of the things that struck me a long time ago watching Pee Wee Herman's Playhouse was how did you see how Pee Wee designed to wake him up in the morning? The complexity of that, the ping, I'm not even sure if I got it completely right. Ping pong ball rolls down the chute, affects a bird, the bird runs over, clicks the toaster pops up. Anyway, it is the complexity of it is mind-boggling to do just simple tasks of waking him up. And the same thing, and I always think this in a sense of what happens if we looked at the fire department, we looked at the post office, we looked at the Veterans Administration, they don't suffer from this complexity of a myriad of public organizations, nonprofit organizations, universities. And so to try to follow the bouncing ball of who's responsible for what is challenging, because though we do have a centralized administration at the state that provides the money for it, following how something starts at the state and then has accountability at the service provision level is mind-boggling. We could do a PhD thesis. We could do a whole talk on the complex nature of understanding behavioral health services delivery in the state of Oregon. How did it get this way is a great question. One of the things that, and I just want to put a pause here, one of the things that we need comprehensively is an understanding is that it is great. And and a big shout out to my friend Janie for her work on Measure 110. But when we put together government by ballot measures or by legislative action, that's all great. And that hears the voice of the people. And that can be sometimes the only way to make effective grassroots change. But the key to that is when we put these things forward is that we need to understand this needs to fit into the structure that we have particularly. And we need to adopt our structures to accommodate that and to make that clear and simple. And sometimes people have great ideas, but they have their eyes on their prize, but forget the back end or the architecture of how is this going to work with our system? Is this going to make another degree of complexity, another level of authority and responsibility? And so those things are always important when we're talking about making policy or trying to reshape the way services are delivered. So anyway, next slide. And so the point about this is you look at this chart and how does an advocate or a lobbyist, where do you stick the needle in? Where do you poke? Where do you do your advocacy? Is it at the CCO level? Is it at the county level? Is it the provider level? Well, the answer is every single platform is best. I've talked to the CCO boards. I've talked in front of the counties. I participate in a lot of state boards and regional boards, but it is a myriad of like it says, a fragmented and complex system. And we are the new kids on, the peers and the consumers. We are the new kids on the block, just trying to sort of find our power and find our voice in this system. So, and it's a challenge. So next slide, thank you. So if you want to cue up the video, what we found is trying to understand the complexity of the system. Where do we raise the points of what we think are fundamental that the system needs to learn? And one of those that we find out over and over again is a clarion call that we've been trying to raise for quite some time in Oregon, probably at least the last 2 decades, is that one of the challenges that people have with services, or so-called services, is the services that they purport to give you may not hit the mark and may also cause some unwanted consequences. And this is a friend of ours, a woman named Danielle, who testified in 2019. And this is just a little blurb about trauma, but I think this is fundamental that, remember that previous slide, if there was a message that I would give to every single platform, the CCOs, the counties, and the state, to hear this particular message, because I think that this is key to redesigning and putting services out in the future. Play that clip, please, Emily, if you would.
And what needs to be known today is that the systems we have created currently to care for our most compromised and marginalized communities often replicate our original traumas.
So that's fantastic. And I have sent this clip around several times to county professionals, to therapists. and find in great support of we need more advocacy to raise these particular issues. So the next slide is the challenge of being a lonely system advocate by yourself at the table with other players, industry and state bureaucrats, and you are a voice of one. And I think I tried to speak, to articulate this in 2019 to a legislative committee that was looking at civil rights. Oh, we lost that screen. Oh, we didn't lose that screen. So this is me telling the Judiciary Committee about you should not, the phrase of this conference, and thanks to MHAO for putting this together, nothing about us without us. Nothing about us without us doesn't mean one mental health consumer in a room of 49, mental health bureaucrats. And so I was trying to eloquently raise that point in my political testimony here. Play this if you would, Emily, thank you.
Good morning, Chair Przanski and Senate Judiciary Committee. I am here and to say one thing. I have some disappointment and frustration with your civil commitment work group to decriminalize mental illness. To the best that I understand, I feel like there was not a sufficient amount of people who have experienced psychotic disorder, who have had civil commitment, who have been involuntarily detained. I used this yesterday in front of a bunch of my Democratic friends. You would not make policy about women's reproductive rights with 49 men and 1 woman in the room. We saw your list of members that were invited. Beyond one individual identifying as living with a severe and persistent mental illness and having been involuntarily detained, we couldn't find anybody else on your list of members who actually has been through the process. And so I just want to say just for that process alone, I would like you to extend the work group and include 20% of people with lived experience of psychotic and behavioral health issues who have been through the system.
Yeah, thank you. So that I have in my archive, probably 20 or 30 clips of me saying this at council, particularly at council processes, at the state legislature, in working at federal government policy. It is something that cannot be overasserted. We are so often marginalized, tokenized, looked at as if we get 1 or 2 consumers or peers in the room, then we're golden and we move forward with what the industry or the treatment folks want to happen. And it's all good because we got 1 or 2 consumers at the table. And I want to tell you, unfortunately, there's been significant times where I have been the only consumer or peer at the table and still have relationships that have been challenged or have been abbreviated because of my fierceness and my criticism of that is not right to move forward something that affects mental health consumers without having them having equity at the table. You can put 20 mental health professionals in the room and 2 peers, particularly if they're new to the rodeo and they are feeling optimistic and excited about participation, only to be left at the end of the process with feeling like they were used to just stamp peer approval on a project that really doesn't provide a whole lot of benefit to what peers want or how peers would direct the system. So it's crucial. And a lot of what I do in my volunteer work is attempt to make more room at the table, particularly, and as of late, with the Governor Brown kicked off a behavioral health council about 18 months ago. And the first thing I said when I got appointed to it, where are the other peers and consumers at the table? And by the way, I have a list of 6 of them. 3 or 4 of them are BIPOC members and 2 or 3 of them are consequential peer leaders. Can't they be also invited? And I was told, look, we understand that. We value, the same old song and dance. We value that point of view and it's very important, but sorry, Mr. Fitz, the membership list has been set and we will try to remedy voice and inclusion down the line. And so like I said, I could tell you 20 times in the last 4 years where we're chasing the train of a process where 1 or 2 of us are attempting to give voice to the consumer and peer perspective, where the deck is loaded against us as far as equity in voice. And also understand that there's a lot of goodwill for peer supports, particularly at the county level. A lot of our most progressive county leaders are 100% behind it. But there is challenges, there are biases, and there is a sort of sense of, are peers professional? Do peers get too much focus politically? Are peers anti-medical model? So there's other biases and discriminations that go on that effectively help limit our authentic voice. Anyway, so next slide, thank you. So we've looked at the money, we've looked at how many, approximately how many people are served, some of the frustrations, the system traumatizes us, doesn't listen to us, we're not in force at the table with an equitable amount of voice, particularly in representing people who also struggle with poverty, people from cultural diversity, people from veterans backgrounds, child and family folks, particularly. But there is some hope, and we do make progress. And I've been doing this for half of my adult life. I've been, struggled with some of my health and disabilities issues, but the other half is trying to put my shoulder to make change and make things happen. And I don't know if he's on the call, but two things I wanted to spotlight and to feel positive about. And there's a whole bunch of other things to feel positive about, but two of them I wanted to spotlight just from the conceptualism of why did they decide to go do what they did around this process. And the first one is a bill called SB 721. Drake Ewbank, are you on the call? Okay, if I take that as a no, take that as a no. Okay, so I wanted to spotlight two of these because one is something that brings in funds, that brought in money, and the other one was making a policy change. So let's go to number two. The first one, SB 721, was a policy change. Wasn't an ask for money. It wasn't an ask for more peer services in the Yukon territory. It was actually attempting to change state law about peer and consumer councils within the state government. But the second one is actually something where an organization, this organization, by the way, that put on Peerpocalypse, conceptualized this, saw it, went out and got their ducks in a row. And so Janie, why don't you, if you can, just give us a little 3 or 4 minute encapsulation of conceptualization. Why'd you want to do this? Why did you think that the Department of Labor was something that meshed with your goals, and why you decided to go after it? Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And thanks for the overview of, what we knew was a very complicated and disconnected system, but yeah, there it was right there in front of us. So I appreciate that. And yeah, Laura Rose, thank you for pointing out all those heads at the bottom of all the advisory councils, and also for sharing, like, it's every level. We need to be at all the tables, and more than just the one or two at a table, but together in mass. And I just also, real quick, if I can, I'm re-inspired, reinvigorated, because as the theme of this conference, and just as this conference came about, it's been several years since I was first introduced to the peer movement, consumer survivor ex-patient movement, where I read, as a very new person, introduced to the peer world, On Our Own by Judy Chamberlain. Rereading it again for the second time, and wow, it has so much more deeper meaning, having been in this field and doing some of this advocacy work, and watching those of you, Kevin, Laura Rose, Drake, Allie, Michael, just all and more, do this work and do it well. And so just a little quote from the book. Frequently, ex-patients are afraid to face their real feelings about the experience of mental institutionalization. Family and friends tend to react negatively to expressions of anger and hatred toward the hospital and staff, seeing these as indications of illness. Patients often feel the same way and may try desperately to believe that the hospital was basically a helpful and positive place. That was my experience and Nancy's. It's a common one. Ex-patients need support in order to express the outrage they may never have admitted, even to themselves. and being with other people who have gone through the same experience can be exhilarating. So just encourage you to read some of these works by the original movers and shakers in this movement. But as for the U.S. Department of Labor grant, yeah, when I first saw it, I thought, no way, that's too big, that's too federal, that's too all the things. And how could anything from the Department of Labor grant fit within our mission? And, you know, just wanted to look at, you know, making sure we weren't going into mission creep. And then one morning, essentially woke up inspired about what it could be and how we write about what we do and how we didn't have to fit with what the Department of Labor necessarily was asking in detail, but what could we bring as a peer-run organization that maybe trains the workforce, that does peer services in an authentic and keeping to those core values and principles way. So we wrote to that, and if we got that, fantastic. And we did, which was incredibly, I'll just admit it, I was stunning. And, you know, because Oregon is leaps and bounds, as we heard, ahead of Hawaii and other states in developing peer services and buy-in, especially at county levels, we had a lot of support letters. In fact, the most of any application that got submitted. So that was also pretty exciting. And it was really based on peer services, supporting folks coming out of incarceration in getting, you know, employment connected to training and employment, whether that was a career path in peer services or any other place. But the magic sauce, what had not been proposed apparently before to them, was a peer support focused program. And so even the 2 case managers it did require, those are peer case managers, not to be blended or mixed with peer support specialists. They're 2 separate positions, but it was all from a peer perspective. And so that's the work that's being done. COVID slowed it down 6 months, so we aren't launching until July 1. But the work this past year has been done to get it ready to hit the ground running come July 1.
Excellent. I don't know if Drake is with us now, but one of the reasons why I want to spotlight this is because it can get, when you start out with this much money is being spent, these are the people who control the money, this is how fragmented the system is, this is some of the challenges that peers and consumers have in influencing process because we don't have the equitable amount of political power to shape things. But there's also, and I wanted to spotlight successes, and particularly why, you know, this one particularly, this is I think it's almost a $4 million 3-year grant, which is fundamentally significant, you know, as the size of it and the support by awarding this grant to MHAO, that they believe in their capacity and their service record and their connections to the community, which is just fantastic. And so I didn't want to just say, things are rough, it's complicated, they don't listen to us, good night. So, give up, forget it. Because with tenacity and with careful planning and bringing in all the brainiacs that Janie and her team did, they were able to land a pretty big fish. Drake Ewbank is with us, and so wanted to see if he could talk a little about the conceptualization of using the legislature to change policy. Again, this is not a financial issue, but also it's important to change policy. And sometimes the route to do that is in a formal process. Drake, are you with us and want to talk about the conceptualization and the need for what came out at why SB 721 was developed? Drake, are you there? Okay, well,
no, I've been working with Drake for days, and he just came on the list, and I'm sure he's just getting something going. So bring him up.
I do see Robert Drake Ewbank on the list. I don't know if he's having a challenge. He's on mute at the moment.
Well, he's just got on there 1 minute ago. It takes him a while to get things straight.
So we'll wait to take the question and answers. Thanks, Penny, for a question. We'll wait to take those question and answers after the break, because I think it should be very interesting. Drake, are you not able to join us with this?
Drake,
Okay, well, yeah, sometimes okay, well, this is kind of an awkward pause. So the point I wanted to make about that, I want you to feel hopeful that we can introduce legislation, that we can land federal grants, that we can increase our voice and our power politically by engagement of other people. The video that you saw of Danielle talking about trauma in the system, how did Danielle get involved in doing that? I did a speech at a previous Peer Apocalypse, and she came up after me and said, I want to get involved. I want to take an opportunity to get involved and do some of this political sort of stuff. And I said, fantastic. When can you start? And so we engaged with her and her support in legislative session 2019, where she had never done that before around peer services in Oregon and testifying. And so, like I said, one of the goals is not just to tell you an interesting story, but also to engage you, poke you, provoke you, to make you curious about, hey, maybe I could get involved and help do political policy system advocacy at some level. So anyway, so that's what SB 721 was exactly that. We introduced it I introduced it to a lawmaker that I have a relationship with, and it then had a hearing this last winter. And so we're still waiting to see what the final vote on it is, but that's encouraging that it's made it so far. So, okay, next slide. So where are we at with timing? So we have about 50. Why don't we go to 10:50 and then take a break and then come back with question and answers? So I debated whether I wanted to say 10 rules, 10 lessons, 10 tips. Wasn't really clear, but I think this is good. So what I wanted to put to you, now these aren't facts, these are my opinions. These things are subject to change, maybe today. I think these are important, and maybe they could be revised tomorrow, and I'm sure you all might have some ideas about it. But I thought these things were 10 important things that I wanted to share with you, that what I've learned about and doing lobbying for peer services, particularly here in Oregon, and relationships and stuff that I've learned. So first slide. I was talking about this with a friend yesterday, is so often, so number one tip, and these aren't in any particular order, but I think they're all relevant, is relationship building. An awful lot of times I see people interacting with the legislature, whether a state lawmaker, they see them in the grocery store. And the first thing they want to do is go up and say, dear Senator, I am supporting, bill number 123, which provides more crayons for kindergarten. And I want to take this time to educate you in the middle of the grocery section or the vegetable section of how important this is, and that you better recognize, yada, yada, yada. That's, I'm sure sometimes that is very helpful to let this lawmaker know how you feel about a particular issue. But also too is one of the things that you need to think of is that these people will be in this role, for the next 2 years or the next 6 years. And so are you interested in just hammering them on pass my bill, support my initiative, or developing a relationship with them over the course of 4, 6, 10, 12 years, however long they're in service? And sometimes I think people forget this. I also do want to say that what you're working on is a relationship of mutual respect. And sometimes that can be challenging, especially if you're feeling like, they're not holding up their end of the bargain. But it is essentially based on relationships. And my relationships with lawmakers has given me a very easy route to just saying, here's a concept, put this in, I want you to make this a bill and let's have a hearing on it and we'll see where it goes from there. And having some experience over the last 2 decades of doing this, I have relationships where they trust me and feel like he knows what he's talking about. He's engaged with other people who have good ideas. Let's try to sail this. Next slide. So this is, and I want to thank my dear friend and colleague and second brain, Laura Rose Masaris, who continues to, also what you should put this in your notes, peergalaxy.com. Please check that out. Please check that out. It's online supports for peers. But this is crucial, and my dad used to teach me this as well, but Laura has also taught me this over and over again, is that use tools, use the opportunity to use tools to extend your power and your influence and your knowledge. And so there's an awful lot of those different kind of tools, like OLS, which is the Oregon Legislative Information System. And it may seem confusing or intimidating at first, but it is a storehouse of information and history and archives of what were peers or consumers doing last session, the session before last, what passed, what committees are taking place currently, et cetera, et cetera. And there's many other tools. This is an acronym here, Oregon Peer Legislative Action Team. And during the question and answers, hopefully Laura can talk a little bit more about that. That is a group that focuses on peers and legislative action. Anyway, so it's important to use tools and also to learn from who are the architects of political strategy behind us. We don't have a whole legacy of older consumer survivor peer folks that have been very successful at engaging with making laws and changing policy, but we have some, but we also have folks that have been very effective in changing rights for farm workers like Cesar Chavez, great books like Rules for Radicals. So that gives you 10 points of sort of how to up your political game when you're working with a grassroots budget. Anyway, so use tools. I say that tools are an extension of humans' power, and the better tools you have, the more effective I think one can be. Next slide. So in relation to using tools, it's very important that, particularly if you're trying to make something happen at a policy level with official actions by a lawmaking body, the county commission, the state legislature, the federal Congress. It's not going to do you any good to go to Washington, D.C. in the middle of August to say, I'm going to promote my bill, because an awful lot of people are on vacation and session is out. Same thing here in Oregon, know the calendar. Like I said, we function in a 2-year process. 1 year, we have a long legislative session where they entertain everything under the sun and an awful lot of bills and money sort of things. And then the second year, we have an abbreviated, very short session. And without you knowing those sort of things, like I showed up in 2014 in short session asking them to fund a particular project. And I did not know that, hey, maybe I should have saved this for the long session when they're talking about money issues and not just changing policy. So knowing the calendar is very important. And particularly, so we are in a long legislative session right now in winter and spring 2021. But knowing the calendar means, like last August when Drake and I powwowed and Laura Rose and I talked, we knew the calendar. We need to get these submitted so it can be filed as a legislative draft beforehand. And so that's important to know the calendar. Next slide. So this is I take pride in this, and it was pre-COVID, that COVID threw kind of a monkey wrench in it. But I take pride in this is that I really like it when a politician or elected says, Kevin, I see you at every single one of my town halls or my constituent coffees or coming to my hearings and supporting my bills. And so to the degree, part of politics is being social, understanding what's going on in the community, and following what is happening in these processes. And so to the degree that I am able and have the time, you'll see an awful lot of me in social media showing up at Democratic parties, at town halls, constituent coffees, regional forums, etc. Just as a member of the audience, just to sort of pay attention to what they're talking about. Next slide. this is another one. How many people have ever heard of who live in Oregon, something called the Lund Report? Just a show of hands, just raise your hand. So reading the news, and not just reading the news, the front page of the New York Times or the Oregonian, whatever your pleasure is, but particularly trying to read the news. And I got this from my representative of telling me what kind of news that he reads. And he's very interested in news about his fellow electeds, about fellow politicians that he serves with, about actions around the economics or budget funding at the federal level, or that the governor decides. News about that is very interesting to them. And it has been a conduit for me to build relationships with us. Say, Senator, have you seen this article about, the CARES Act, COVID money coming to Oregon, or in some decisions? And it's a good way of building rapport, just as long as you don't end up over spamming people with the news that you discover that you think that they must hear about. Next slide. So this, and regarding being a good source of information for the electeds, here's one of the biggest prizes for me a success. So we, in the state of Oregon, making state law, besides the governor, we have 90 elected officials. And one of the things that I'm always wondering about is how can I, in an informal process, make greater connections with our lawmakers, where they can look at me and say, Kevin knows what he's talking about. He puts information in front of me that's relevant and valid to the decisions that I am going to be making. And it has been very helpful to me to be able to get those people who I send them news, I send them information. I only have 7, but it is a prize to me that 7 of our state lawmakers have given me their personal text and says, if you find news, if you find information, if you find something that's relevant to the bill that I'm working on or promoting or decisions I have to make, please send me information. In fact, send me information 5 minutes up to when we're going into a hearing. I trust you. I think this will be important. So please send me information and feedback. And that's awesome. It's a prize. I was telling somebody yesterday, I just got another person who said, here's my cell phone number, keep me informed. And I appreciate that. No one's paying me to do this. An awful lot of my work is based on relationships of trust and, and that they know me and feel like that I'm an honest player and wouldn't abuse such a situation. Next slide. This is one too. Know your triggers and know your deficits. I got trained. Some people have seen David Oakes do a thing on climate change, a longtime advocate in Oregon, talk about some of the work that Mind Freedom has done in the past. I got trained by the folks from Greenpeace and the folks at ACT UP that we're going to be in the parking lot with a megaphone. We're going to block your timber logging group by chaining hands. We're going to get in your face sort of activism. And I thought you just take that raising hell, calling them out, criticism right to the board meetings, council meetings, and the button down flat affect world of legislative lawmaking. And I had a rude awakening. I first entered that like, hey, you guys are all important people, and so am I. I am here to give it to you straight, ladies and gentlemen. And what I realized was I didn't really know my place on the chessboard. And I'm not trying to denigrate myself. For those who know me, I have high regard for my talents and my skills. But it's also crucial to have some humility and understanding where you are, if you're looking at a chessboard and you're delusional and you think you're the king or the queen, but you're actually a pawn, acting like the king or the queen gets you a high five and a gold star and then directed to an empty room or a process that goes nowhere because you've been marginalized as an arrogant, offensive, person, and we've heard enough from you. And the next time they see you, you can see them rolling their eyes or trying to turn away from, I've heard enough from this person. So, and this was an issue for me because every time I started interacting with them, I was like, you people with your power and your political position make me feel inadequate. So I need to let you know, stop making me feel inadequate. That's not the place. It's not the time to do your psychotherapy about these are the important people and I'm not important, and to let them have it before that. I mean, it's just, that doesn't work out to play that out on a public stage. And these are lessons that I continue to learn and continue to develop on and continue to try to adjust. So that's good. This has been very good for me to know, and it's an ongoing process. Next slide. Same thing again, being strategic. Particularly, there are people who have told me about particular processes and what one needs to do. But we're not talking about, I don't know if we have any people who's ever done calculus or basic high school math. Doing political lobbying is not math. There isn't a definitive science to this is the way that you do this. And I came to this process with an individual who was intimidated by the process, who feels inadequate at times with people who are rich and are on the top of society. I need to counter that, or I need to put that in my pocket. And I also need, like I said, to know my place on the chessboard. I came into this game 30 years ago thinking, hey, I know what's up. This is cool. This changes lives. And I need to put you on blast. But what happened is I burnt some bridges and had an effect of, this guy is not connected to any sort of strategy or any process, is just sort of venting his spleen, and that burns bridges and makes people uncomfortable. Also too is this point about Debbie Downer. Nobody, like we started out with talking about how much money how much money we're spending and how many people are served. There's no politician who wants to entertain 5 minutes of me talking and complaining about peers weren't involved here, consumers weren't involved here, shame on you, shame on you, shame on you. What's going to be happen? You suck. You better change, or I'm going to do something or whatever. It's fine to have those feelings, and I have those feelings all the time, particularly. But they have the keys to the kingdom. They have the gold. They make the decision. It's not rational necessarily, but if they don't like you or they find you that you're an arrogant son of a bee, they are going to pull away, and you're going to limit your influence and your ability to have a positive relationship with them. So this also works in my personal relationships too. So next slide. Okay, so this workshop comes with one goal: to engage you, to be a worm in your psyche, to say, hey, listen, I'm interested in getting more peer services, more consumer engagement, more healthy and wellness things to happen at the state level, the federal level, or the county level. But not everybody wants to be a peer advocate or a peer system advocate. Not everybody wants to go and testify and try to change the laws. So define what you're attempting to do. Sometimes legislative session will happen, or with some particular politicians, my goal is not to get them to fund my peer respite bill or to support a policy change, but it's just to have a better relationship with them, where they know where I'm in a relationship with them, and they know who I am. And sometimes that is simply a positive goal, and it has benefit because they call me or email me and say, we're doing this panel at this conference, or we would like to invite you to come testify on this particular issue, or can you give us a referral or something like that. But like I said, trying to be clear of what do you individually want to accomplish? What do you want to see? And that I think that should sort of define, your behavior and how you track out, how you want to get engaged. Next slide, last slide. This is very important. Be prepared to make mistakes. So I'm going to tell you a story. How many people have a smartphone in the audience? Let's see, just a quick raise of hands. Okay, smartphone. People know what that is, I think. In the smartphone, for some of you who are still Luddites getting with us, I see Mike Leibachek there. I'm glad that you got a smartphone, so you're with us. One of the things in the smartphone, they have a thing called contacts. Okay, somehow, I don't know if it's the Russians or the Chinese, but my phone got a virus and I needed to reboot it. I rebooted my phone and I ended up rebooting my contacts. I picked up my phone one Saturday morning, hey, I'm not going to mention the senator's name because I don't want to embarrass myself or them, but I picked up the phone like I usually do 10 times a year on a Saturday morning. It's best to call Senator John Doe at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning and call their work phone at their regional office, because I know that they're looking over papers and just returning phone calls. That's a great window of time to call them and just leave them, you know, a message. Dear John Doe, dear Senator John Doe, this is Kevin calling. I wanted to talk to you about my peer respite bill, or I want to talk to you about a policy change that the governor's doing, or whatever, and just leave a message. So what happened, why I asked about the smartphone, is I reset my smartphone and I reset my contacts. So what I thought was their work phone number at their work office was actually their home cell phone number that I had gotten, but had not ever used. They had called me on their cell phone, but my contacts folded that into as her work contact number. This senator said, Kevin, good morning, but I should tell you, I don't take political phone calls on my home cell phone. And you, of all people, should know that. We've been, you know, we have these conversations 10 times a year for the last 3 or 4 years. Why are you calling me my home cell phone? This is completely unacceptable. And I was like, holy Toledo, I just made a horrible error of thinking that I just ring up this powerful senator on her cell phone Saturday morning to give her my 2 cents. And I told her, look, I am very sorry. I did not mean to call you on your personal cell phone. I know that that is not good decorum unless you give me permission to, and we don't have that kind of relationship. So anyway, so that was a mistake. Thankfully, she called me back 10 minutes. She said, please call my work number and leave a message and let me know what's going on. And so I did. And then she called me back and said, Kevin, I'm very sorry for being so grumpy and mad at you. These mistakes happen. I don't think that you did it, you know, for ill will, and I believe you. So let's talk. What are you interested in talking about? And I was like, for 30 minutes, I was like, oh, do I tell my partner that I screwed up and called one of these people on their cell phones and made a particular mistake? People don't want you coming to their front door, and they don't want you invading their private life without an invitation. And so what I thought was like, oh my God, I blew that relationship. So that was a mistake, and I'm sure that I will continue to make mistakes. But that's very important to know that. Be prepared to make mistakes, and be prepared to fail, and be prepared to go to a setting where everybody else is wearing suit and ties, and you're wearing a Nirvana t-shirt and cargo pants and, you know, combat boots, looking like you just came out of the forest, you know, which is like in Rome. I mean, one of the points of mistakes is people do and dress and behave the way they do. But also too is sometimes it's a mistake if I'm coming to the table, I want to just look like another person, you know, in a gray pantsuit and everybody else. I don't want to be screaming, here's the unkept guy who just wandered in from the forest to give us their important point of view. And so in some of those things, it's been, you know, those have been not mistakes, but those have been things that I want to pay attention to, because it's not, because I want to be influential, but I also want to understand the customs and the traditions and the decorum and the way that they behave. So speaking of that, one of the mistakes, and this is an ongoing thing, sometimes you will see me in testimony where I am wearing one of my provocative t-shirts in the background, and other times I'll be wearing a suit. And so sometimes it depends on if I know the committee, if I'm personal friends with the leadership, you know, but it's always a guess, and sometimes I make mistakes. So anyway, so next slide. So I think these are works in process, but those are the top 10 sort of things I want you to kind of think about. And I'm sure there are other people who could give ideas about that. So I love what I do. I love what I do. And it's not just because to have some success and stuff cross the finish line, but the people that I get to work with and the brain power that they have and the empathy and the heart they have and the desire they have to create a better world and better services for people like me who suffer is just amazing. There's nothing else I would ever like to do on planet Earth than to help improve our systems for people who are suffering from extreme states and to make that better. And the people that I get to do it with are just golden. So that's me. My name is Kevin Fitz, and here's my contact information. One of the things I want to say about myself is that sometimes I can be extremely serious, and sometimes I can be, you know, a wannabe Jim Carrey stand-up act. But one of the things that I really, really pride myself on is that I have a very large network of people who know me and know who I am. And one of the things I take great joy in is introducing one peer leader to a powerful political activist, or introducing one peer leader to another peer leader, of just growing the network of people who know each other and do good work, and to grow the farm as a sort. So anyway, I'm glad to be here, and thank you for letting me do the formal part. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back and have some Q&A.
Kevin, Drake is available now.
Yeah, we'll wait until the Q&A, and Drake will be able to join us in the back and forth Q&A discussion.
Yeah.
So it'll take 5 minutes. I don't know if there's some with you. So, so that was the professional meet. And so what I'd like to do here is also too, is we have, I don't know if Janie's still with us, but I know that Laura Rose and Drake are with us. And what I'd like to do is take questions from folks, and then and help field that to maybe Laura Rose or Janie or Drake might be able to answer that better than I could. So why don't we just start, and Emily, if you will facilitate the the questions and just go from there.
Yeah, I know we did have some questions throughout the chat. So the first one that came through is if individuals can have copies of the slides after the workshop.
Yes.
Okay. And the other one is there a way to ensure the 20% legal requirement is followed?
Let's throw that one to you, Drake. Be more explicit about what they're talking about as far as 20% inclusion around involvement.
The Oregon statute 430.075. We posted a link in the chat.
Actually, it's related to all this stuff is sort of related. We originally started out to replace funding for OCTA, which was a consumer-run agency that the state funded. After it withdrew funding, we tried to get a statutory mandate for it to exist. We couldn't fund it because the Republicans were vetoing anything coming out of Ways and Means. So there were a bunch of extra pieces, including the Consumer Council, a policy on self-determination, and the 20% representation statute that came out of that process because it didn't cost anything. We could change policy around those kinds of inclusions. Anyways, it has been uniformly kind of semi-ignored at times, and is one of the conflicts that caused me to get booted off the council, which caused me to go to the legislature to try to make the council independent, which it was intended to be anyway, because we wrote the legislation to actually be an independent body, and nobody ever thought that they would start manipulating the membership. So we ended up having to actually try to get a law that said it had to be.
So what we're talking about is something that's in state administrative rule, or is it a state law that
It's
says,
an actual statute.
It says 20% of your work groups, councils, committees, and task force under the state of Oregon's Behavioral Health Administration shall be populated with no less than 20% of consumer peer voice. Correct? That's what we're talking about. So the question is, Laura or Drake, so that's on the books. How does one enforce that? And how do you get them to toe to that line?
Well, I have a case that's in the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals right now, and I don't recommend that as the short version of how to get that enforced. What really needs to happen is to have a conscientious administrative body to deal with. But if they don't recognize it, there have been several occasions where they've just simply ignored it, even when they've been informed about it. So it's a pretty powerless feeling, because at one point, if you started arguing, you were ostracized. So.
Okay, next question. One of the things I want to say is there's a significant amount of rules and procedures and laws on the books, particularly with the contracting around services and what the consumer's rights are, that are not enforced, and trying to figure out, the miasma of who the person to contact is, how to get them to play the game by the rules that they set out is an ongoing challenge. Next question.
Yes, so this question was for Janie, and I do believe Janie is no longer in the workshop currently. And Laura Rose, you may be able to answer this. In what part of Oregon is the work of the DOL grant going to happen in?
DOL means the Department of Labor. So just want to make that clear for people who.
Thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So I believe that work is happening in the Portland metro area at this first stage, but there's opportunities. Part of it is because they're working with some of the correctional institutions and the county jail programs that they're able to work with in that area at this time. So they had to have agreements ahead of time in time for the grant. And one of the challenges was trying to get all the letters of support and everything done during the pandemic. We were like in the throes of the pandemic around March and April 2020 when we were working on it. So anyway, that's where it's starting, and then it can grow.
Thank you. Next question.
The next one is how much of the money is allocated to behavioral health is tied up in the administration of various oversight groups, distribution orgs, and implementation versus the amount used on actual treatment. I believe that's in reference to the Measure 110.
That I don't know. And that probably is not an easy answer. And that, if I gave you an answer today, the Measure 110 committee is just getting their wits about them. So that is unknown at this point, and that number probably will change moving forward. Like I said, when Janie was here, Janie was one of the chief signatures on Measure 110. I really think that was awesome. But I think the challenge that they have is that trying to shape that and how that fits into an Oregon Health Authority process is, an ongoing work. And I think when you're designing legislation or ballot measures or whatever, you need to have a key of how is this going to fit into the rest of the system with their budgets and their authority. Laura Rose, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I want to say about that is it's interesting to try to research the budget of the Oregon Health Authority and formerly Department of Human Services. They're now calling it ODHS for Oregon Department of Human Services, not to be mixed up with Department of Homeland Security. So ODHS and OHA budgets, they work in a way that they kind of are incremental. So they're always looking at, well, what are we increasing our budget? And they release these 1,000-page documents during the legislature that you can go through section by section, what different parts of it are. Sometimes it's surprising. There can be multi-million-dollar mistakes or whatever. I mean, so it really does take attention to go through all that detail, but sometimes it's hard to get a hold of. It's not a straightforward, simple budget. Sometimes, a lot of times, it's sort of this incrementalism piece. So you're trying to navigate to find out, well, what's the overall budget, So there are some presentations about that, but it's almost like it's made so it's harder to find it, it's harder to read it, it's harder to get through it. But I think, it'd be great for people like we do with OPLAT, Oregon Peer Legislative Action Team, when you get together and you kind of look at it, have different people looking at it at the same time through what materials we do get a hold of, then we can start to get some ideas and see where do questions need to be asked or that kind of thing. So yeah, I think, it'll take some work to get to that answer of how much is direct service versus how much is administrative. And there's a lot of ways that can be categorized, and just sort of the art and science of categorization of expenses and allocations. That might be, you have to really get clear on what that definition is. Otherwise, you'll get kind of a muddy answer.
Thanks, Laura. Next question.
Michael, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Kevin, this is a question regarding some of the things that you said in your presentation. One of them was you pointed to how ineffectual your attempts were at protest, if you will, at getting in legislators' face. Do you see value in protest when combined with people who are working diplomatically with legislators on the inside? And if you do, how might we enact such a strategy?
Yeah, very good. One question, just a show of hands. How many people in the audience? It looks like we have 2,000 people in this workshop. How many have ever heard of folk time? Let's just see a show of hands. Folk time, folk time. Well, that genius that just talked, one of my best friends for the last 35 years, who used to kick my butt in the Consumer Run Drop-In Center in chess in the early 90s. Mike Liebachek is now the executive director of Folk Time, which replaced our friend Angel. And God, I love Mike. So the question is there benefit to getting in people's face or what? And the reason why I wanted to say this is I brought it up in under tools. There's a fantastic book that I would love anybody who's interested in political organizing. It's called Reveille for Radicals, and then another book written by him called Rules for Radicals. And and he sort of lays out, like, I'm a grassroots small activist. How do I make change? One of the things is that they talk about is to know, like I said, know your place on the chessboard. If you are, say you're the president of the United States and you have a whole bunch of mean and angry trolls behind you, you can sort of let it fly whenever you want to let it fly. But if you're a supplicant or if you're a peasant and you're trying to address the king, it might feel liberating to let them know, and I'm going to tell you the truth right now, you son of a gun, because you need to hear it. Maybe you might get some movement, and some cheers or applause from your counterpoints, but what are you effectively trying to do? Shame them on a public stage? Well, there are great opportunities to do that, and we see it happen in social media. And I'm not saying that that's not an important thing to do, but you're trying to build a relationship with somebody. Particularly, Oregon, we have about 45 people in the state, lawmakers, who are responsible for what happens with mental health. And so if they see you coming, and if you aren't participating in the polite diplomatic game, they're going to write you off and marginalize you. It's just my experience. But there are other times at town halls and constituents' coffees. I was at a homeless council yesterday. One of our leading female physicians, who is a county commissioner, started crying during her testimony about how frustrated she was with the lack of provision of services for BIPOC folks, and why our homeless services and our behavioral health services weren't more led by consumers and peers. I don't think she got up to the microphone and thought, I'm gonna end up crying. But I thought that was an effective, authentic piece of testimony. So anger, of course, and disappointment and grief and loss and all of those sort of things, these are emotional people. But also too is you're going to see this person again, and these people talk to their colleagues about your behavior or your reputation and who thinks you're valid. And a lot of that game is not listed when they teach you on how to be an effective lobbyist or advocate. So this is my point of view. Next question. I see Andrew and Nicole have their hands up.
Nicole, you had your hand up, and you had a question in the chat.
Yes, thank you. First of all, Kevin, thank you for your presentation. I want to say that I have a little bit of disagreement with your last statement. I do believe that it's very, very important for legislative work to be the type of person that you're talking about. However, I think that also, as we know, with peers, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. And I do believe that, history is riddled with times of revolutionary change with large groups of people being loud. So I just need to say that. But my question is, so some of your job is as an informant, it sounds like. So what type of research is done to provide information to battle big money and its influences on decisions that are being made? And how can we provide, what can we provide to create a bigger pool of research to complement personal testimony?
Yeah, fantastic. Somebody was actually talking about, and I think it might have been Andrew Phelps, our friend from the south of us, about actually consumers and peers that were involved in research. I think that that's fundamentally important. People may know of a few researchers, a woman named Nev Jones and another woman named Laisha Ostro, and Shira Collings and folks like that. We need to, well, it may, you know, one of the first things when I got a job as a peer leader and had 4 or 5 staff, I used to spend nighttime, and this was 20 years ago, I would spend after hours tracking all of the family organizations on the West Coast, getting their fax number, sending them important criticisms of the way that they were doing it and why they weren't valuing my civil rights, and they needed to back up and let our voice be heard. Now, I felt very passionately about that, and I thought that was an important thing to do. However, if I had to do that today, I think I might start more on the relationship end and then waiting until we're, you know, and I always say at times, you know, there's the Kevin Fitz who's not ready for prime time and talks stuff off the record. But what am I attempting to do, and what particularly challenging the big money? There's a lot of people who talk about pharmaceutical influence, private corporations, for-profit corporations coming to Oregon and wanting to make a profit, and people rallying against that. And it feels good to vent your spleen about it. But also too is complaining. If you are in a rowboat and a aircraft carrier comes by, you can scream and yell and say, how dare you take up my sea lane? But what at the end of the day, what have you affected? And some of those things may feel good and are right on point of pointing out, but some of that may not, some of that energy may be more effective in particularly moving forward what your goal is. That's just my 2 cents. Next question. How much time do we have? Okay, good. We have 15 minutes left. Go ahead.
And I see Andrew Pagram. Sorry if I didn't say that correctly.
Oh, sorry, I was still muted. Thank you. Yeah, Kevin, so many things I want to ask you, but I'll stick to one. I am curious what your thoughts are on Measure 109 and its potential impact on peer support, or vice versa, I should say. So far from what I've read of the bill, the only requirements to be a facilitator are 21 and older, high school diploma, and passing the license that the state will be developing, it sounds like. So it seems like there could be a lot of potential for peers to be involved with that's development, and possibly helping to further democratize mental health. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, so let me ask you a question. Do you think that those requirements are too stringent, not stringent enough?
I don't know. I think it'll depend on what this licensing requirement will end up looking like. It sounds like it's still in the works.
Andrew, unpack what Measure 109 is so the other folks can know what you're referring to.
Sure. Yeah. So Measure 109, it's basically the psilocybin measure that Oregon recently passed.
Psilocybin for us who aren't botanists.
Oh, sorry. Psilocybin, basically psychedelic mushrooms.
What?
And
what?
Just passed recently in Oregon, and the state of Oregon has 2 years to develop a program that would essentially train people to be facilitators for this and to pass licensing requirements. So far from what I've seen of the legislation is that there is no higher education requirement other than just having a high school diploma and being 21 years or older. Yep. So I see possibilities maybe for the peer movement to ally with this huge, potentially really huge radical shift in mental health.
Yep. I think it's actually profound. It's actually history making. I, through some fortunate stroke or maybe just previous relationship, I am actually on that Measure 109, that mushroom therapy, psychedelic mushroom therapy council. I am a consumer advocate. I did not get appointed to this council to say, what are your particular feelings about this, Mr. Fitz? I am just there for 2 reasons, particularly what is informed consent around that? What is the training of the professional who's going to take me through this process? what are protections for the consumer, particularly around this. I'm not sure. There is a licensing subcommittee that has just formed. We just started a month ago. Let me redirect this a little bit and tell you what I'm particularly concerned about. To the degree that I investigate this and understand this, ethnogens, plant materials, and I guess the Catholic Church could even tell us this too, is that it used to be part of culture that people, elders and Paleolithic societies, some of these uses of plant substances to enhance spiritual, philosophical, existential has been around for us ad infinitum. Here is the challenge to me. You take the elder, the mystic, the group bonding, whether you're high in the Rockies or you're in the Amazon or in a Mexican, tea ceremony, you take the ritual and the community out of that. You take the psychoactive material, you give it to a platonic, i.e. agnostic, psychedelic practitioner. You see them for a minimum of twice. And what concerns me is I'm all in favor of folks getting services that they need. But I'm also very concerned is I'm a person who comes from a very difficult place of trauma, of significant distrust. I saw a counselor, a therapist for 4 years. It wasn't for at least for the first year and a half. I was calling it in. I was defended. I had very little trust for this person. It took a year and a half for us to get into serious conversations about how my alcoholism was destroying me and causing more inflamed psychosis. A year and a half. This process currently, and this might change, says at least a minimum of 2 contacts. One is I, of the consumer, come in your office, you tell me about the magic of taking this mushroom and what it may or may not do to your psyche, having an extreme positive state. You have 2 sessions that are mandated by this, and maybe this might change, but you touch base with a person you've never met before. You get 50 minutes to talk to them, and they say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put you on a lounge chair. Someone's going to be in the room, et cetera, et cetera. And then we'll see you on Tuesday. Bye-bye. Tuesday, you come into the thing. All right, we're going to get flying. We're going to put you on your trip. You go into this experience. For some people who are naive, who have never done this before, are doing this in an experience with not a trusted other, not a wise shaman, from South America who has generations of wisdom around this, to some new guy who was a Starbucks barista who is now trained as a psychedelic integration practitioner. So you go through this process, do this induced state, and then come out of that back to normal consciousness. And here is this person, except for an hour last week, you've never met before. You're in an extreme state of vulnerability and challenge, and you land up emotionally right in their lap. How in the world could a person like me, who suffers from deep, deep paranoia, distrust of other humans, find anything except a challenge to, you've destroyed my defenses and eradicated my boundaries, and here I am, a raw, open human right on your lap. I just met you yesterday. I said, I would love to see there be a lot more before you even do the ceremony. The third part of that process, Andrew, is there's supposed to be integration. The third appointment is we're supposed to go through what insights and things that you learned, and me as your practitioner and integration person is going to help you make sense of that and be a guide for that. That's all good, that there might be some psychotherapeutic process to that, but I also think is you've removed some of the spirit from it, the community from it, and it looks more and more like an antiseptic clinical process. And I'm not sure that whoever created these plants or these substances had that in mind initially. So anyway, we're at the very beginning of this process, and I'm raising lots of questions. And also, I'm an agnostic about it. I'm not going to recommend to anybody here to take Zyprexa or anybody here to go to a 12-step meeting that's up to you. But I'm also not here to criticize a process that the citizens of Oregon decided they wanted to take a chance at. So this could be an ongoing discussion as I learn more. But let's move on for the interest of questions. Go ahead.
And Drake, I see your hand up.
I too want an easier to use mute button. If anybody's listening at Zoom. Yeah, I had a question for Kevin about something that's happening right now as we speak. He has a pretty good ally in Senator Gelser, who has generally supported almost everything we have done, plus has done a lot for the respite bill. And there is also a bill to increase the, lower the bar, I guess, for forced treatment. That is Senate Bill 187 right now. And that also made it out of the committee, and Senator Gelser actually voted in favor of it. My question to Kevin is how he is going to manage in real time that particular predisposition of the legislature to still vote along with the lock me up element of the profession.
Yeah, I don't know. One thing people should know, Drake Ewbank was actually on public radio in Oregon talking about this particularly. And my sense was, in talking to some friends before and anticipating it, you're up against, when you talk about the issues of civil commitment for people in extreme mental health states, besides the consumers and besides the people who've been through that process, and maybe your protection and advocacy or your disability rights organization, other than that, we're in a very lonely community where people, one, even understand that coercion and force causes significant trauma, cauterizes the ability to trust. I mean, you can't be both my therapist and my warden. Maybe you can, but I'm not sure that that makes particular sense. Here's the challenge with this. We have 90 lawmakers. I thank you for the suggestion that Senator Gelser and I have a meaningful relationship where she follows my lead, or maybe I'm exaggerating it. We have a very positive working relationship because I support her processes where I find them valuable and meaningful. However, there is a sense of, I'm not going to be public to attacking a person who is sponsoring 3 of my bills and has been very supportive over the last 6 to 8 years on the important role of supporting consumer voice by some political strategy of calling her out and either attempting to shame her or to have a kangaroo court of public trolling her because she didn't do what I wanted to do on one particular bill. Also, too, is we should be very careful of trying to read the tea leaves of saying why a politician is doing what they're doing because we think we know why they're doing that. One of the things to be clear about is we have a 2-part process in the state of Oregon in our lawmaking. One is the policy committees. And one thing that if you're a legislative watcher, sometimes you'll find that there are controversial bills that get a significant majority support that will pass through the first process of the policy committees where the people will know this is a hot potato, or I want to serve leadership and leadership wants this to pass. I might not like this, but I'm expected to support my party's direction on this bill. And so one of the things, particularly around trying to understand the nuances of, I believe in my heart that this person is against this bill and has said this previously in the 2 previous lawmaking sessions, how much she is concerned about the rollback of civil rights protections. However, it is not for me to tell her that it's my belief that she doesn't care about these issues because she's not fighting this fight the way that I think she should. Remember, with this bill, this particular bill, it still has to go through the money committee, and to the degree that you get involved and understand, there are people, this was when it happened 2.5 years ago, there are people who said, I'm having conversations with at the state of, this has a huge price tag. We have so many other priorities. Let them have their discussion and their powerful arguments for this and that. But I find it hard to believe with the crisis that we are in and the money issues that we have, that this thing is going to make it across the finish line. Now, who knows whether that is? But if I have a relationship with one senator and she's supporting a bunch of initiatives and is talking me up to get on councils or helping get friends appointed to other councils, I don't want to throw that relationship in the garbage because she is not voting 100% of what I think is essential. Albeit this particular issue is the reason why I got involved in the first place, because I had been forcibly treated. So it's not for me to tell anybody else how to behave politically, but other people have opinions about how I should track with my special relationship. It's not a special relationship. It's a relationship I've invested in, since the Obama administration when she served on his National Disability Council, I want to build relationships where they say, Kevin may disagree with me, but he's not going to throw shit on me or try to flame me or troll me from a public stage. Other people may have different opinions about how to navigate that. But I know one thing's for sure, in 2 years from now, I want her to be my friend in the summer of 2024 when I say I have these 3 bills that I want you to champion and I want you to introduce. And to burn that relationship, that's a decision that I don't want to make. But other people might say, throw her under the bus, F the whole thing. Well, that's fine if you want to give up your career as being an effective advocate. That's just my point of view. Next question.
All right, Kevin, so it is 2:30, so I just want to be mindful of that. But one great question that came through the chat to finish it up is, how does a person get involved with what you do?
Very good. That's where, is Laura Rose here? Laura, tell them about Oregon Peer Legislative Action Team, OPLAT, and then we'll end on that. Also, I want to say these people, Mike Ewbank, Drake Ewbank, Laura Rose, Janie, she's missing in action, are all fantastic, extremely knowledgeable, serious people who have a lot of track record and history and make up and populate an awful lot of the way that I think about things. And we don't always see eye to eye, but I love them, and they are great resources in their own right. Go ahead, Laura Rose, tell them about OPLAT, and also tell them about your cool hat, and then we'll check off.
Well, great. I hope people take the opportunity to consider joining OPLAT. We have a mailing list, and I put the website.
Before people start signing off, I also want to thank Emily Nelson, who's just been a fantastic, she helped me with my dress. She helped me with my photo studio setup, and, she helped me eliminate some of the cuss words I was planning on using. So thank you, Emily. You are a sweet dear and a treasure. So go take it away, Laura.
Yeah, so OPLAT, you can join on Facebook, or you can join the mailing list, or both. That's where we post a lot of these events. It's a great way to start conversations and get involved on topics. Kevin Fitt's a member, and then you can also become a friend of his to get his updates and news. We've put the links to his contact information on the last slide. So if you put your name in chat, we'll be able to put that in there. peergalaxy.com is our website for online and telephone accessible peer support, recovery, and wellness activities. We have this month now over 45,000 offerings. In a month, we have over 30 warm lines with peers, 24/7 availability for a lot of these things. And so you can go, and this is one of the reasons why I built it. You can go and you can say, okay, what's going on in the next few hours? What's something I can access right now to connect with my peers, connect with people, find a wellness activity. There's art, there's media, there's chair yoga, there's music. There's so many different things. There's so many wonderful things happening. We have a section of the website called Consumer Input Opportunities. And so if you take a look at that under the calendar, it's on the Peer Galaxy 2.0 beta calendar. It's called Consumer Input Activities or Opportunities. That's another great way to find out about these events. Please share events as well. If you use Facebook or if you join the mailing list, it would be wonderful to have it, because we're all stronger together. And I know there's many other names than even those that Kevin mentioned, and several I've had the opportunity to work with some of you attending this meeting. We're all making change. We're all making a difference, and we all need each other. Thank you so much.
Will you show us the merch? This is cool. Show us, get your camera so people can see the peergalaxy.com hat.
I don't know if it'll show it, but that's our new hat.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Mike Ewbank, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. I wanted to say that Senator Gelser is certainly our ally, supporter, and her voting in support of 187 going to the floor was a political ploy. She's definitely against the bill and will continue to fight against its passage. The reason she did it, as she stated, was that there was a protest conducted by the Republican members of the House and Senate that day, where they decided to not vote on anything. So she did it for future influence, I believe, within the GOP side of the aisle.
Very good. Any other questions? Did everybody enjoy Peer Apocalypse? I think they had 400 plus people. It's just awesome. It's awesome. I really miss, I've been this COVID thing just on Zooms all the time. I have a great need for social contact. And so this, this is the next best thing, but it's just wonderful. There's no other, maybe alternatives, but this conference is a place where I can go and be nervous, awkward, and odd and feel like I fit right in. So.
One thing Kevin didn't mention, but sometimes we have phone calls for OPLAT, and sometimes our legislature has a mental health caucus. And so when we're able to, we get together and we talk about the issues during the legislation because things are happening in real time. So that's a great piece. Also, I mentioned this summer, they're going to be working on legislative concepts. And in the fall, they start legislative days again. So you can ask the legislator to sponsor your bill if you have an idea that you think needs to be heard. And some of the legislators, Kevin knows, are very open to constituent ideas, even if you're not in their district. They're very open. And so they'll work with you. They have attorneys at the legislature that help draft the language. So you don't have to be an attorney, but just bring your ideas forward, the needs, and let our peers know so we can support you. It's a great opportunity. And then they decide what gets done. They do the final version before December for the next legislative session. So we'll have a shorter legislative session in 2022.
Yeah, very good. One thing I should say is that I didn't say it, but Allie Linfoot runs the peers department at Clackamas County. That woman is a pioneer, the model for what that ought to particularly look out, getting contracts on the ground, giving technical assistance to providers, growing the peer-run organization clout and the service provision par excellence. There is no county that does what Clackamas County has done and is doing. Those are other trying to follow their lead. But I just wanted to give a shout out to Allie Linfoot, and she's a public government official, but she certainly is a strong supporter and a pioneer. And we would not be where we are with peer services, particularly in the metro area, without Allie's leadership, her confidence, and her boldness to stand up for what's right in a way that they invite her back to the table and she still keeps her job, but she calls it out like she sees it. And she is just a wonderful inspiration. Allie, you want to say anything real quick before we sign off?
Just thanks, Kevin. I just want to do this now, but yeah, thank you so much for the super kind words. And I have been told by somebody a few years ago that I have the ability to slap them in the face and they don't even know it's happened. And it's an art. It really is, Kevin. And you spoke about the art of doing this kind of work very well today. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, you're a darling.